Welcome back to My Conscious Dad on your hometown station, AM 1220, KHTS. If you're just joining us today, we are talking about parents guilt-tripping their children. And before we went on break, we were kind of talking about the kids taking a little bit of accountability too.
Yeah, you know what I was thinking for a moment? I thought to myself, if you're young and your parents, you have this experience of your parents putting this guilt trip on you, until you get to the point where you're able to look through the responsible lenses and see that you're the one that's choosing to feel the guilt, and because you're the meaning maker to everything, so you're the one that's interpreting the guilt rather than, all right, my mom said go, so let's go and just get off it, rather than, yeah, but she said it in a certain way that had an undertone, which means that she's upset at me. So before you can do that, as the victim version, it's okay for you to come back to your parents and say, hey, you know what, last night, I know you said it was okay for me to go, but, I felt really bad when I left. And if you really, and it's okay to give a request at that time from that lower level consciousness. It's okay to speak up for yourself and say, hey, the next time something comes up and you really don't want me to go, just tell me. I'd rather you be honest with me and say, hey, I'd rather you stay here because you're leaving me hanging. Then I'll just, blow off those plans so that I can be here with you and keep my word. But if you are okay with it, I want you to really let me know you're okay with it so that I can go guilt free and just enjoy myself, because it really didn't set me up to win. It's okay to verbalize yourself like that until you get to the point where you're able to not feel guilty, when you're able to not interpret the guilt along with it. I
think that's a very, very powerful request to come from a kid, especially because most of the time, unless your kid says this, you're not going to think that they feel that way. For instance, if I were to tell you, if you were to tell me no, I'd rather you stay here, then I'm going to be mad. I'm going to go to my room and be mad that you didn't let me go out and, this and that. But if your kid is telling you that that's not the case, that I would rather be here if it's going to make you upset, I'm not going to have a good time anyways because I'm going to feel guilty, then at that point you should realize that your kid is very conscious, and most kids don't do that.
Yeah, and if they do, you got a learning curve to get ahead of. That means your kids are outgrowing you. They're becoming more conscious than you are. I'd like to bring Andrew in the conversation, since this was kind of one of the things that he jumped on and threw that out there. What are some of the things that you can throw out as a scenario when you're talking about kids having that guilt trip from their parents? Do you have a scenario that you can throw out?
Just a common scenario would be just having going somewhere. Jasmine alluded to it earlier. Your friends come up and say, oh, I have this thing, and then you have a previous commitment to your parents or whatever, and they're saying, well, your family's coming over and doing this, you said you were going to come over, and they're like, dang, yeah, okay, but it's not that big.
Really don't want to be here.
I really don't want to go, but you can hear it in their voice, the way they say it. And you're just, okay, fine. And then I call up my friend and say, yeah, I have to go to this family thing. Sorry, guys.
Notice how I said I have to go to this thing.
I do that too. I'll be, oh, guys, my mom said I can't go.
Yeah.
But
yeah. My mom's making me go.
For me also too, Andrew, that's most of the time when I'm feeling a guilt trip, is when I said I would go to a baby shower, a birthday party or whatever, and I decide I'd rather do something with my friends. And all of a sudden I'm getting all kinds of guilt trips from my dad, my mom, my grandma, my aunt that I only see once a year, that I would probably see at that baby shower. So it's kind of, I know that they're consciously putting that guilt trip on me because they want me to be there. It's not because they don't want me to go have fun somewhere else.
But I don't think anyone's consciously doing anything to put a guilt trip on
Well,
you.
then it's unconsciously putting a guilt trip on me, not so that I won't have fun somewhere else.
No. If you made a commitment, you were going to, let's say, hey, we have a wedding, and right, you said you were going to go, and all of a sudden you're starting to back out. It's like, well, we've already made plans to, accommodate you, and we've got the hotel room and the car and everything. So it's more of a holding you accountable to when you say you're going to do something, rather than, like I don't get excited. I don't get off on going, oh, I'm going to put a guilt trip on you because it makes me feel better about myself. It's more about the inconvenience. And I think most parents are probably nodding their head right now. They're going, no, it's the part of you that says you're going to do something and then you don't do it is where we're kind of not okay with. We want you to, when you say something, commit to it, and then handle all your circumstances so that you can follow through with what you said you were going to do. Now, in the scenario that you brought up, Andrew, if you said you were going to be at a certain particular event, a holiday event, and your mom said, "Hey, can you be here for us?" You can say, "You know what, Mom? Usually I make plans. I'm not sure. Can I make my commitment on that morning?" Don't. Sometimes we commit too soon, and then something better comes along. So instead of making that commitment too soon, why don't you say, "Is it okay if I make that commitment on that morning?" Like my son, I asked him to go to a football game this weekend. And last night I'm like, "Hey, are we still going?" And he goes, "Hey, is it okay if tomorrow by noon I get it to you? As long as by noon you let me know." Because he knows that the other stuff's coming down the pipeline. It could be there other possibilities of people are asking him to go places, or he has possible jobs that are lined up for him. But it's okay for you to ask your parents or whoever's you feel is giving you that guilt trip, to make that decision at a closer time rather than committing a month in advance. Why do you feel like you need to commit a month in advance when people ask you?
Because at the time it sounds good.
Okay. So this is perfect. So this is what a kid does. This is what kids do. "Oh, that sounds great. I'm in." And then all of a sudden, a month goes by and you're like, "Yeah, that's not feeling so good anymore." Yeah. Parents don't do that. Parents, when they commit, they don't go by their feelings. They go on, "No, so-and-so's getting married. That's my goddaughter. That means a lot to them. Yeah, I don't feel like going, but I'm going for them." There's a lot of times I do things I don't like to do. There's a lot of times your mom signs us up for stuff, or, "Hey, can you go?" And it's like, "All right, I don't feel like going, but let's go because you made your commitment." And it's just things. I'm not drawn by my feelings. When I make a commitment, it's my word that's important to me, so I go because of my word. And that's a good possibility that you guys don't really have a relationship with your word. There's a good possibility that young kids don't, their word is not important to them. It's not their bond.
I think that's true for some people. I know for me, integrity and being my word is very important. And there are times where
unless your friend comes with a fun thing to do with boys and
if he wants to go, if they want to go to a Justin Bieber concert, I'm not going to go to that wedding. Yeah. No, but I think if parents communicated a little bit more how important that event is to go to. So for instance, in the wedding situation, maybe I'm not that close with your goddaughter, and me being at her wedding isn't going to change anything. But however, you being at her wedding would.
And you've actually said that to me a few times. Like, I've been invited to certain parties that I'll have a relationship with them, but they're distant cousins or distant relatives to you. And so you're like, "Hey, do you want to go with us?" And you're like, "I don't really know them. I have other stuff." So it's like, "Hey, no big deal." But I think just having the conversation is important rather than, "No, you said you were going to go. Let's go."
Right. That's all communication.
Now here's a scenario with Andrew. When Andrew, let's say his mom says, "Hey, your cousins are coming, or if we got family coming over, we'd love for you to be there." I don't think Andrew thinks of the possibility to say, "All right, Mom, let's negotiate. Is it okay if I hang out for an hour or two and then
that doesn't come at all.
Exactly.
You just surrender.
You surrender and throw up your hands and then call your kids and act like a 4-year-old and go, "My mom said I gotta stay here.
I can't go out, guys."
Yeah, exactly. And we're just opening up the possibility that you are a powerful creator. You can make it look however you want if you use the tools in your tool belt. Some of us don't realize we have those tools to be able to communicate effectively and open up new possibilities. I would love for my kid to go, "Hey, Dad, I know I can't make it here, but how about I cut it early here so I can come back and I'll be there for you? How about if I catch you on the back end?" Now, if it's really important for you just to show your face, I go, "All right, tell you what, why don't you just show up on the first 20 minutes and I'll introduce you to people and then you can dip out." Oh, that's even better. There's a win-win somewhere in between there, rather than you being the little 4-year-old that scolded and just going, "Fine, I'm going," and then have resentment the whole time and not having a good time, rather than you saying, "Hey, Dad, can we find some happy medium in here?" I'd love to have kids that will grow up like that, going, "Hey, Dad, can we find somewhere where there's a win-win?" I'd be excited. I'd be jumping for joy.
Right, and both parties, both the parent and the kid, have to be open to that, because I can come to you and say, hey, let's negotiate. And you're like, no, you're going. That's it.
Yeah.
So again, it doesn't work for everyone.
It starts from the top down. The parent has to be the one to cause that shift so that the environment is open for negotiation. So it's open for looking for win-win. If your parents are controlling, dominating tyrants, and the environment in the home is not open for any negotiation, I feel sorry for you. You're grinding out a tough another 7 or 8 years until you're 18 until you can figure out how to get out of there. But it really starts trickling from the top down. As a conscious parent, if you open it up for, look, I want my kids to be able to share with me when they don't want to do something, or I want to be able to have that dialogue so that we can figure out how to create a win-win. I don't want my kids growing up in their 30s hating me because I made them do things, or they felt guilty because it was something that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, and being a conscious parent doesn't necessarily mean you have to be this way towards your kids. Maybe you just have to have an open mind and learn from your kids and let them kind of guide the relationship until, because I think kids, they find out more things than parents do. We're constantly learning when parents are kind of, maybe learning less or learning at a slower pace. But just being open to what we can bring to the table, that's just being conscious right there.
You know what's amazing to me? Sometimes I'll have, moms and dads that will come in and get some coaching from me. And during those sessions, I'll ask them, I'll give them homework, and I'll say, I want you to go home and have your kids do a report card on you. I want them to rate you in these different qualities, these different abilities. And the look on the parents in their face is like, you want me to do what? I want you to get feedback from your kids on how well you're parenting. And they look at me like I'm crazy, like I've never heard of such a thing. And I think that it's so refreshing to hear what your kids have to say about you. It could be a whole new perspective and different level of growth for you if you're open to that possibility. But I think that the average person looks at it like, well, how would they know what a good parent is? They don't know anything better than I do. No, they might not know anything better than you, but they know what they're feeling. How they're feeling may not be accurate because they might be misinterpreting it, but it's real for them. So whether they're misinterpreting or not, and they feel sad and dysfunctional or depressed or suppressed by you, wouldn't you want to know that so that you can learn how to shift your beingness or your ability to say certain things in a certain way or adjust your tone so that you can cause less damage, less psychological damage to your kids? Wouldn't you want to know that as a parent?
Yeah, I mean, we always kind of talk about how there's not really a right or wrong way to parent, but there is an effective way to parent.
That's right.
And I think that kind of comes into play when you're asking for feedback. And I think feedback in general is so hard to receive. I mean, it's very challenging to receive.
Yes, thank you for shifting that.
It's one of the hardest things I've ever had. It's one of the most challenging things I've ever had to overcome or experience was getting feedback from, friends or employers, anything. It's so difficult for me. And I couldn't even imagine getting feedback from your kid because it's like you don't want to acknowledge that that's who you're being.
But there are some humble, honest people as parents that would welcome that.
Right. No, it's healthy, and feedback is so great, but it's, for me at least, and I think for a lot of people, it's very challenging to receive.
You have to be ready for it. You definitely have to. It takes some thick skin. It takes a lot of courage for you to hear it, and then not beat yourself up or judge yourself and just look at it for what it is. It's just feedback.
Or just to, just discard it like, oh, they don't know what they're talking about.
That's right. Well, there's that would all of a sudden shift you into the arrogant and righteous part of you that doesn't allow you to grow. But the humble, honest, open person that hears that feedback and really takes it in and starts to make those adjustments so that they can cause a different result outside of you, those are the people that are actually growing in their relationships. They're becoming more effective parents. They're becoming more conscious. And, I want to say this. As a parent, the way that your kids are showing up in the world, their results are your results. The way that they're showing up is a direct reflection of your parenting. And, sometimes the truth hurts. sometimes it feels good because you know you've been working really hard and putting in that effort and putting in that awareness and putting in that extra going deeper and really working on some of those things, taking the time to really sit down and have a conversation rather than the busy parent that's too busy to sit there and even have a conversation with you, or they're focused on other things or distractions, or they're more important about what someone's saying to you on Facebook or what kind of cup that Starbucks has or whatever it is that's way more important than you being a more effective parent.
I think we kind of talked about this in a show, a couple months back, but I just kind of want to reiterate that we've talked about parents who don't want to necessarily take responsibility for their kids and that the results are their results, that whole idea. But we also kind of went over that if it's not you who's influencing or inspiring your kids, that it's somebody else, and that's just as bad. You not being the one to influence or inspire them is, it's worse to have somebody else doing it.
No, this is what's worse. You living in the illusion that, well, they're supposed to be listening to me. No, nobody's supposed to be anything. It's your job to figure out how to inspire and empower and influence people, and especially your kids. They're not going to just automatically do it. It's not in their DNA to listen to you all the time and to only hear your voice. At a certain point, other people make sense to them. Or maybe some in their dysfunction, other people like gang members or people that are up to no good, their friends are speaking into that dysfunction and it's getting them all riled up. It's the music that makes them dance. But that dysfunction didn't happen overnight. It happened probably most likely in your home. When those babies were born, they were pure, they were perfect. They were like a brand new slate. The dysfunction started to happen somewhere in your care, in your home, in your family, and your ability to be an effective parent. And I'm not making you bad and wrong as a mom and dad. It is what it is. But I think the conscious parent really looks at that and takes accountability and says, all right, this, what I have is what I have. I own it. It happened on my watch. Now that I'm aware of it and I'm conscious, I'm going to look into my own personal power and start figuring out how to redirect. Let's do some course correction here so that when they are 19 and 20 years old, they take off, flying, and rather than sitting here and not really, still sleeping on my couch, eating my food at 30 years old. And before we close, I want to talk about a transformational teen leadership program that I'm having here in the Santa Clarita Valley. It's one of the best, and I'm saying because it's mine. It's one of the best transformational trainings for young people probably in the world. And I've been doing this for over 20 years. And if I'm not the best, I'm in the forefront. I started doing these trainings for teenagers. I'm really good at it. I'm passionate about it. And, I've never seen a training where kids aren't coming out, more loving, more grateful, listening more, contributing more around the house, and just like a fire's been lit inside of them. I'm doing it in Santa Clarita in 2 weeks on December 5th and 6th. If you're interested, call me at 661-505-5021. And then if you go onto KHTS website, you'll see some of the banner and ads. It's funny because when we advertise this type of work, I'll get maybe one call or one email when it's like the most hidden secret in the world. This type of powerful work is not everywhere yet, but that's my vision.
Sounds great. We'll talk about more after the break. Stay tuned for more of My Conscious Dad right here on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Welcome back to My Conscious Dad on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. If you're just joining us today, we talked about parental guilt trips. And if you missed any of it or you want to hear it again, you can always find it on our podcast online. We're going to go ahead and go over a quick recap of what you missed.
So we talked about old tactics don't work in new school in today's world.
We talked about parents often coming from the listen and obey tactics.
We gave different scenarios of what guilt trips your kids are experiencing.
We talked about verbal punishment.
We talked about creating win-win rather than win-lose.
We talked about effective communication.
We talked about following up and doing some cleanup as an option.
We talked about you being the meaning maker.
We also talked about the art of negotiation. In case you didn't know, you can negotiate and create new opportunities for yourself.
We talked about the importance of your word and your bond.
And then the last but not least, we talked about it's your job to inspire your kids.
I got one more.
All right,
That's pretty important. So we also talked about how learning goes both ways.
Now let's talk about next week.
Okay, so next week we're going to be talking about the fear of confrontation.
Ooh, this is my favorite. I love this one.
I am afraid to talk about this one.
Why?
I think I identify with it definitely. I also have a hard time, it's very challenging for me to identify or to to confront it, like this fear. So having a fear of confrontation, I even have a fear to confront the fear of confrontation.
Wow, that's pretty deep. You know, this topic actually is very common with probably 90% of my clients is especially, and it's funny because the people that have, you know, the fear of confrontation are usually the really nice people. They're really nice, they're caring, they're compassionate, more like the supporting style personality. You know, they're the golden retrievers. They'll give you the shirt off your back. They don't speak up for themselves. They let people walk all over them. They're givers. And for whatever reason, and a lot of times they just don't want any kind of situation to turn ugly. And so what they do is it's almost like they walk on eggshells, not ever getting close to the point where you get somebody upset or get someone mad. So they just kind of conform. They go along with things. They settle. They take the brunt of it. They carry the burden. But what happens is a lot of times those people carry some resentment. And there's no freedom, there's no peace. They don't feel fulfilled because they feel like they let people walk all over them. And a lot of times it's because this imaginary fear that if they have confrontation, like they're gonna melt like the Wicked Witch of the East. Is it the East
the
or the
West?
It's all good. People know what I mean.
Same thing.
Well, actually, only the old school people know what I mean when I talk about the Wicked Witch.
I think everybody knows.
Even kids? Do you know what the Wicked Witch is from? Where? Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead?
Wizard of Oz. There you go.
The Wizard of Oz. There you go. All right.
Come on.
Well, you're a movie buff.
Yeah, well, okay.
I mean, you don't have to be over 40 to know what that movie's about.
All right. That sounds good. So the fear of confrontation is what we're talking about next week. It's a great topic. You know, we're going to open up the possibilities and really explore, you know, the psychological, you know, underlying tone of why people are afraid to speak up for themselves or to be able to have a conversation with other people, to hold people accountable, to say, hey, it's not okay for you to speak to me like this. So what they do is they just shut down. They stay quiet. Or they roll their eyes, or they'll do it in a real subtle way. But here's what people don't realize is because of your fear of confrontation and you don't speak up or say anything, you're actually giving the other person permission to keep doing what they're doing.
Right. You teach people how to be in relationships
That's right.
with you.
Yeah. And it's almost like, you know, you're upset because so-and-so keeps doing what they're doing, but it's on your watch that you haven't identified and explained to them and articulated, hey, you don't get to speak to me like that, or hey, it's not okay that our relationship is going that way. Let's redirect it. You don't know how. You don't have the confidence yet to be able to stand up for yourself and to be able to say, hey, you know, this doesn't get a look like that, or you don't have the tools in your belt to figure out how to go to them and negotiate something.
Right. All you have to do is confront them, and I think the word confront or confrontation has a negative connotation when it's not even a bad word.
No,
it's just a word.
Yeah.
And it's somehow when you confront somebody or you say, I'm going to confront them, it sounds very negative.
Scary
right.
to people. And what I like to do is I like to, you know, talk to when I'm working with my clients that's an issue they want to overcome. A lot of times I'll tell them, let's get off the word confrontation because that word it's a symbol for a certain experience that you have that probably wasn't a good experience. So let's switch out the word confrontation with address. Hey,
That's so much more inviting.
I have an issue that I want to address to you or address with you. You know, when you go up to somebody and you go, hey, I want to have a discussion about something. I want to address an issue. When you say I want to address something, it's so neutral. It's like, all right, no problem. What are we going to talk about? Well, I want to talk about yesterday when this happened. You know, what was the thought behind that? There's ways to speak that you don't get people riled up. So in the last maybe 8 to 15 years or so, I haven't really been in any like major confrontations or any confrontations for that matter, because the way that I speak to people, I already use certain words that has people bring their guard down before we even talk about whatever the issue is.
Right.
So I set myself up to win when we're talking about certain things.
Right. You learn how to confront people in a positive way.
I learned to address certain things in a certain way that they don't already feel guarded up, walls up, ready to attack.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for joining us today on My Conscious Dad with me, Jasmine Urbina, and my dad, Alex Urbina.
Right here on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.